Hey Gumby, do you want to help with my wrap up? Okay. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nova and we're going to do the second installment of my wrap up rewind series, which is where I just wrap up the previous months in 2023 that I didn't make a video for because I didn't have a YouTube channel yet. It's mainly just for me to have record of everything that I read this year, because moving forward I'm going to be doing a wrap up every month, and so I wanted to have one just for all of 2023. So last time we did January and February, which I combined because I had a lot of series and one of them spanned across both months. And today we're doing March and April, which is mainly just because while March was like a pretty regular reading month for me this year, April was really slow, so I didn't think it needed its own video, so I'm just gonna combine the two and we'll be going over the stats for both months. Alright, so for March, I read 11 books and I read 3,072 pages. 6 of them were on my physical TBR that I had gotten used or thrifted. 3 of them also on my physical TBR, but I had gotten them new from a bookstore. 1 of them was a free ebook that I found online because I probably couldn't find it anywhere else. And 1 of them was borrowed from a friend, which is actually just my roommate, so right downstairs. And this month I had 1 2-star, 1 3.5 star, 2 4 stars, 4 4.5 stars, and 3 5 stars, so a pretty good reading month. 10 of them I read in tandem with the audiobook, so the text and the audio. 1 of them was just physical because it didn't have an audiobook, and I didn't listen to any just straight audiobooks. 6 of the audiobooks were from Scribd. 3 of them I found online, again because I probably couldn't find it anywhere else and didn't have the money to buy them on Audible. 1 of them was borrowed. It's the same book that I borrowed physically, again from my roommate's Audible account, and 1 where I didn't listen to an audiobook at all. As for the smaller stats, 9 of them were fiction and 2 were nonfiction. 10 of them were adult books and 1 was a kid's book, and 8 of them were novels and 3 of them were novellas. I had 0 DNFs this year, and my book count year to date is 33 in March. Alright, starting off, I started the month with Notes on an Execution. This is a book about a serial killer and his whole story told through the women in his life. And I thought this was really fascinating. We get a lot of different points of view. We get a few smaller chapters in here from his point of view, except it's in second person, which I am really drawn towards. I just really like when things are written in second person, so I thought that was really fascinating. This was a good 4-star for me. At first I couldn't really tell what would have pushed it up to a 5-star because this is objectively beautifully written. And then I saw a video review from a YouTuber called Lexa Ray Reads, and she made a really good point about how this is a story centered around crime, and one of the police officers, the main point of view of the police officer, is a woman of color, and it doesn't really delve all the way into the race side of cops. It kind of ended up reading like an episode of like Law and Order, which as someone who loves Law and Order, specifically SVU, I had fun with it feeling like Law and Order sometimes, but I agree that it probably should have been a little more critical about stuff like that. Like, it touched on it enough that the author knows that it's something to dissect, but didn't go far enough. Yeah, I'm really grateful that I saw that review because it kind of put into words what I was thinking. But overall, this is really good. I really enjoyed this and I would highly recommend it. It's really unique in how it tells the story through so many points of view. Oh, Gumby is screaming. Hold on. Hey! Hi! Can you hear her? That's the light. Come here. Come here. We've been joined. So yeah, I do recommend Notes on an Execution. So the next one is a book called A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. Okay, bye. Alright, now I can hold it. So yes, this one is called A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. This is a collection of essays from a half-Indigenous author, and this is detailing her experience as being half white, half Indigenous, but also living on the reservation, so that feeling of not being white enough but not being Indigenous enough. It talks about the systematic oppression that leads to generational health issues in Indigenous folks. Specifically, the first essay, which is my favorite in the whole collection, it's called A Mind Spread Out on the Ground because it talks about the depression and suicide rates with indigenous folks and how in her language, the direct translation of the word that they use for depression literally means a mind spread out on the ground. And I just thought this was really, really great. It talks a lot about like food insecurity and how that's a direct symptom of indigenous folks kind of just got shoved into the reservations and how they are really poor. And yeah, this prose is stunning. She knows how to fucking write an essay. Like, this is incredible. They were all fantastic. I'm really happy I read it. Alicia Elliot is a Canadian writer, so a lot of what she talks about is relating to her experiences in Canada. So it talks a lot about like the residential schools. But here's what's really interesting. The audiobook that I listened to was very different from the copy that I have. I got this copy because I just liked the cover more. And then I realized as I was reading it that this is the Canadian copy of it. And the audiobook I listened to was the American version of this book. And there are a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences, because examples that she gives when it relates to like government and stuff like that, in this one, she talks about like Canadian government, right? And then in the American release, she changed all of that to reference American politics and things that we would know as good reference points. And then the audiobook had sections of it that this book didn't have. This book had a section of it that the audiobook didn't have. It was really interesting. I was having to kind of flip-flop and pause and, you know, reread sections so that I got the whole experience. So yeah, just know going into it that there's multiple versions of this book, and this cover in particular is the Canadian, but if you're an American, I do highly recommend the American edition because it touches on a lot of things that we know about. So we have a good frame of reference. But yeah, this was easy 5 stars. I blasted through this in a day and I thought it was stunning. Okay, my camera ran out of storage, so sorry if the angle's a little bit different. Anyway, the next ones that I read were A Psalm for the Wild-Built and its sequel, A Prayer for the Crown-Shy. So these are novellas in the Monk and Robot series. And these are about Dex, who is a tea monk, aka they go around from village to village and, you know, brew teas and talk to the village folk and is kind of their like unofficial therapist for a minute. It's very sweet and very cozy, except Dex kind of feels like they're stuck and they're kind of frustrated about it because they're like, I have everything going for me, why am I not happy in anything that I'm doing? And then like a little bit more backstory, years and years and years ago, all of the technology, like the robots in this world, because I guess it's set in our future, all of the robots gained sentience. And instead of like an uprising, they just wanted to go live in the woods. And they were like, can you leave us be? And the humans were like, okay. And so they haven't seen robots in forever. And Dex, while on a little journey, comes across Mosscap, who is a robot. Mosscap has been sent on behalf of the robots to make connection with humans and ask the important question of, what do you need? Like, to ask the humans, like, what do they need? And Dex is like, oh boy, that's a huge question. And Mosscap is like, will you help me figure it out? And Dex is like, I don't have anything better to do, so sure. And these books detail their little adventures together, and they're so darling, and it's so cozy. And the second one takes place after Dex has told the other humans that Mosscap is with him. So he's made contact with a robot. So Mosscap kind of becomes a celebrity, and they're going to different villages and meeting up with Dex's family. And it's just so lovely. I thought these were fantastic. I gave them both like 4.5 stars. I don't know why they're not like perfect 5 stars for me, but they're really damn close. They're so lovely, and I already want to reread them. They're so sweet. I've been very partial to the novella series that Tor does, because All of the Wayward Children, All of the Murderbot, these, and then like another novella series by Seanan and McGuire are all part of the Tor novella series. And yeah, I'm gonna be keeping my eye out for more of them because they seem to pick good ones. Next up, I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and I didn't like this. Oh boy, I buddy read this with my friend, and we just kept on sending each other voice notes back and forth as we were reading it, being like, this main character sucks. Like, she's just not likable. And because it's in the first person, which I typically prefer third person, and like maybe that's a symptom of having just read like fan fiction for a long time. Like, I don't see first person as being in the head of someone. I see first person as someone sitting in front of me and talking directly at me. And so this very flawed main character is just like talking at me about why she sucks. And then everyone else in the book is like in love with her. It basically takes place at her college reunion where she wants to show up, and she just like has this visceral need for everyone to be jealous of where she is in life because she's borderline narcissistic, and a murder happens, and it does this thing that I hate, where like there's a character who knows all of these clues and has an idea as to who killed the person, but they won't just say it. They'll like red herring it all throughout the book. And that's just not what would happen in real life. Like, this character would not be like dropping little hints slowly over the course of a night before like the big final reveal. Like, it was very goofy. None of the characters were likable. The main character sucked, and neither of us liked it very much. I think I gave it like 2 stars. Yeah, I gave it 2 stars. Only because it was like competently written. Not for me. I know a lot of people loved this, but the few people that I've seen who also really didn't like it, I felt very seen by those reviews. On a higher note, the next one that I read was How High We Go in the Dark. Oh, I didn't mean to make that pun. But yeah, How High We Go in the Dark is a collection of stories all set in a post-pandemic world. And this book is like so whack. This is like if you took Station 11 and made it really whack. And this was a 5-star book for me, so I mean that in the best way possible. But I think a big difference between Station 11 and this one is that this pandemic doesn't feel like it could happen in real life. Like, it's not like a COVID type situation. But yeah, some of these stories were so visceral. Specifically the one, I don't remember what it's called. Hold on. City of Laughter. It's the second short story, and it made me feel so gross. And there was this one where there was like a pig who could like psychically communicate, and his name was Notorious P.I.G. And why was I emotionally attached to a pig named Notorious P.I.G.? I don't know. But all of these stories are like interconnected, so as you're reading it, you're noticing characters show back up, or like through lines, or something that happened in this story is the reason that this thing happened. And I just think this was like masterfully crafted. I have never read anything like it, and I don't think I ever will again. And I will read Sequoia Nagamatsu's grocery list. Like, this was incredible. If you haven't read this and you're okay with like really whack premises that you just kind of have to roll with the punches for, and if you're okay with like pandemic stories, even though like I said, this pandemic isn't like realistic to our real life, I highly recommend it. Next up, I read a novella named Crossroads, and this is about a grieving mother who lost her child, and her child starts showing up as like a ghost, a specter kind of thing. And this mom starts kind of going crazy, believing that she can bring him back, and that's essentially the whole premise of it. It's a really interesting take on grief and in horror, and I gave this like 3.5 stars. It didn't have as much of a punch like I'd wanted it to, but it was a super quick read and I enjoyed it well enough. It was very well written. So if you're interested in like horror novellas, I would give it a shot. This next book is both in my wheelhouse while also being the most out there when it comes to the traditionally published stuff I've been reading, but it is The Charm Offensive, and this is a romance book. This is the first and only like true romance that I've read. I've talked about it before, but I am no stranger to fanfiction. So the idea of queer romance stories is not foreign to me. What is foreign to me is traditionally published romance, because 9 times out of 10, I think it's really badly written. And the things I've seen on BookTube prove to me that I do not think that is a genre for me. I only picked this up because I found it thrifted and a friend highly recommended it to me, like a friend that I trust and also doesn't read a lot of romance. So I was curious, and this ended up being a 5-star book for me. So this is about Dev, who is a producer on a Bachelor-esque show, and Charlie, who is the Bachelor. Charlie is kind of this disgraced tech bro who is on a PR campaign to like fix his image, and part of that is becoming the newest Bachelor. But Charlie is like deeply awkward and has really bad anxiety and OCD. Dev obviously does not mean to fall in love with him, but so it goes. And Dev kind of becomes his handler a little bit, and they end up falling in love. And I just thought this was precious. I think a good part of the reason that I liked this so much, like I said before, I don't really vibe with first person, and this is written in third person. I just thought these characters were so likable and so well-rounded, and Charlie's specific OCD, I don't have OCD, but my roommate, who I've lived with for years, does have OCD. And when I was explaining a lot of the symptoms to them, and then also when I was reading it and kind of comparing it to like what I've noticed, the way that Charlie's OCD presents itself is almost exactly how it presents in my roommate. And just for that alone, I think this is pretty good representation, right? Like every little aspect of it felt very real, and it was something that I've experienced living with someone with this kind of OCD. And so while I can't speak on it, my roommate kind of can, and just based on what I had told them, they were just like, wow, that's really cool that they captured that. So yeah, I really would recommend this to even non-romance girlies, because I had a blast with this. And this is the bar now for romance. If it doesn't reach this, if I don't have this much fun while reading it, I don't think it'll be for me, but we shall see. That is a journey I'm planning on going on eventually. Maybe I'll do a video where I read like a couple of like book talk favorite romances that I actually think I'll like, not the ones that I know for a fact I won't like. But yeah, Charm Offensive, 5 stars, love this. Next up is the biggest book I have ever read, Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. As I said before, Seanan McGuire is my favorite author. This really solidified her as my favorite author because this was one of the easiest 5 stars I've given out this year. For me, it lived up to all of the hype. So Middlegame is about 2 twins named Roger and Dodger, and they are separated at birth, and there's a reason why they are named Roger and Dodger. But they end up finding each other and chaos ensues. And are they human? Not completely. Who knows? And that's kind of all I want to give you. This is one of those books that I think is best going in completely blind. What I will say is huge trigger warning for a suicide attempt that is referenced throughout the rest of the book after it happens. But if you can stomach that, it's a really interesting dynamic between the two of them. There's this sense of like you and me against the world, the feeling of like the two of them standing back to back while fighting against their enemies, and I just cared about them so much. They're so great, and I love that it spans throughout their entire lives basically up until they're in their like 20s. What I will say is the audiobook is like 80% good. I don't mind it. It's done by an actress from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I think. The other 20%, the vocal choices that she made for some of the villains are some of the most baffling choices I've ever come across. It was unlistenable. Like I would eventually have to like skip ahead in the audiobook and just read their chapters physically because I could not stand it. Hold on, I'm gonna give you an example. I had pulled this out and posted it on Twitter, and everyone was like, what the hell is going on?
Not yet, unless that's an order. As long as my first pair is around, you won't authorize a new batch, and they make an interesting control group. One set has become so entangled as to be ritually useless, even if they're a fascinating puzzle. And the second set has managed to avoid the doctrine almost entirely. I want to understand why. I'm going to give them another 6 months, and if they haven't produced useful results by then, I'm going to set them against each other and see who survives. It will be interesting to see what happens to either set if one of them is killed. I have theories.
Killed. It's so bad. God, imagine listening to that for like hours. It's not good. This is one of the best books I've read this year and one of the worst audiobooks I've heard this year. So I would highly recommend this as a physical book only. The next one is a quick one because it's the kids book that I read, but I read the annotated Phantom Tollbooth. This was my favorite book as a kid, and I years ago came across this annotated version and I hadn't gone back to reread it, but yeah, this is basically the whole story of the Phantom Tollbooth, except there's like extra information on the sides, both about like the process of Norton Juster writing it, but also like historical significances of like why Juster did certain things. And yeah, I just thought it was really cool. This is a big hunkin' book, but I gave this like 4.5 stars. It still holds up to me. And then the last one for March is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. This is the other nonfiction that I read. And this is about someone who worked at a crematorium. Caitlin Doughty has a YouTube channel if you've ever come across her stuff. This is my roommate's favorite nonfiction book, mainly because they lost their best friend like 7-8 years ago, very suddenly, and reading this really helped them come to terms with what happens after death, what happens to your body after death, and it kind of made them not scared of that prospect. And yeah, I just thought it was really nice. It was easy on the science, so like I could understand it, and it was pretty charming with the writing, and I just like Caitlin Doughty in general, so this was a lovely read. I give this 4 stars. Alright, so we're just gonna blast through April because I only read 4 books. This is by far my slowest month of the year. So 2 of them I found as the ebooks on Scribd, and they also had the audiobooks on Scribd, so I kind of listened to the audiobooks on one device and read with another device. One of them was used or thrifted, and one of them was from the library. So I gave 1 a 2.5, and then 2 a 4-star, and 1 a 4.5. And all 4 of them I read in tandem. 3 of the audiobooks were on Scribd, and 1 of them I had to find online for free. All 4 of them were fiction. All 4 of them were for adults. 2 of them were novellas, and 2 of them were just regular novels. Didn't DNF anything this month because I barely read anything this month, but the books year to date at this point is 37. So the first one that I read was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This is about 2 friends and their journey throughout their lives as they build a video game that becomes a success, and they fall in and out of friendship, and it's just about the beauty of friendships and resilience. And I mean, I guarantee you've heard of this book already. If not, you've probably already read it already, so I don't need to be the one to tell you that it was really good. But this is one of the ones I gave a 4-star, and I thought it was fantastic. So the one that I gave 2.5 stars was Once There Were Wolves, and I already donated my copy of it. Can I be honest? I don't remember what this is about. I think the main character studied wolves. There was a sister who got murdered or kidnapped or something, and then there was a cop who was like the main suspect. It was really boring. It was just objectively well written, but oh boy, not for me. I think in my review I said this is a good learning opportunity for me because I'm figuring out what I do and don't like, and this kind of slow paced emphasis on nature, it doesn't do it for me. I'm someone who also doesn't like pregnancy in really any capacity. I don't want to read about it. I don't want it for myself. And there's I don't want to spoil it in case any of you actually want to read it, but there is a visceral scene involving the birth of a child, and didn't love it. So yeah, 2.5 stars, the most middle of the road, I guess, because I don't think it was horrible. It has its audience, but oh boy, it wasn't for me. And then the novellas that I read, one of them was a 4-star, one of them was a 4.5, was Fina and Defect, which are part of this whack portal IKEA series. Yeah, the first one is about these 2 exes who work together at this IKEA type store, and they kind of get sent off to go find an old woman who has stumbled into a portal. And because in this universe, the store is so windy, the layout of the store is so confusing that it is the prime spot for portals to open up. It's explained way better in the novellas, but I thought it was so funny. The way that corporate was just yeah, so we're gonna need 2 volunteers, and you guys were late today, so if you could just take one for the team. And they're we're literally getting sent into a portal. It was just really goofy, and I loved it. And then the second one had to do with one of the employees from the first one, not one of the 2 main characters. He was just kind of a guy that people didn't not for any reason. They just thought he was creepy, and he didn't do anything necessarily to deserve that aside from just kind of being a little socially awkward, and you're in his head. And I've never felt so bad for a character. I gave this one the extra 0.5 because there was one scene in particular that almost made me cry because he didn't deserve that. And oh man, he's just so sweet. He just wants to work at this IKEA, and he wants to do a really good job. Eventually, the crux of this one is that he comes across alternate dimension versions of himself, and one of them is like non-binary, and one of them is like the cool guy, and one of them is like a war hero. And it's just so funny. They're all so different from each other, and it kind of gives him this confidence, and the furniture is coming to life because, again, whack IKEA. And I just thought it was a blast. These two were so much fun, and I'm so here for these like really weird experimental novella series because I've just loved them all. They're so much fun. I love a weird book. But yeah, so that was April. That was March and April. Thank you for watching. I will be returning to this series to do May and then June. They're each gonna have their own separate episodes because I read enough in both of them to warrant it. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will be seeing you in a future video. Bye!